So, if you're a fan of the original 1990s Animaniacs cartoon, then of course one of the characters you might know about, probably more than anything, is a character that a lot of people were hoping for to show up, fully in the rebooted soft continuation of the series when it was on Hulu. Now, yes, we did see her basically in some cameo appearances on screen as part of an angry mob of original characters that basically was kidnapped by Chicken Boo, who was in disguise as a hunter, trying to, make them his trophies. As well as we saw her in some picture cameos as well. And basically one of the explanations as to why, the show originally, was kind of changed up a little bit. But when you look at Minerva in the original series, she took on a lot of roles outside of her two initial cartoons, and we'll get into those in a moment. But basically, she took on, she took on the role of a suspect on a boat in her first on-screen appearance, which is Herculean Yakko. Then, of course, she had some other roles as well. She played a femme fatale, basically chasing after something and always getting her tail grabbed by Ralph, who was always forgetting his lines or something like that. Of course, you also had her in the Macadamia Nut parody of the Macarena song and video. So she had a lot of roles. And originally she was pitched to team up, according to what I understand. She was originally pitched to team up kind of in a buddy, I wouldn't say buddy cop, but more like a odd couple kind of thing with Slappy Squirrel. Yeah. Don't believe me, look it up. Apparently, one of the original writers on the series came out not that long ago and basically stated that Minerva was supposed to be paired up with Slappy Squirrel in sort of an odd couple kind of like scenario. And you can only imagine what that, how that would have played out. I mean, with the way Minerva was always characterized and everything, I could see Slappy basically being, ready to basically reel her in, or Slappy would be, prepared for like whatever wild take or gag that Minerva would, end up doing. Like we know one of the popular traits with her shorts, and again we'll get into this in a moment, is the lustful melt. And pairing her up with Slappy, you can only imagine Slappy basically being like, okay, reaching over to the side, grabbing a mop and a bucket and just mopping and squeezing a melted Minerva into a bucket and then dumping that bucket upside down to reform her. I could see something like that possibly occurring, or would have occurred in my opinion, had they gone through with it. Now, speaking of one of her shorts, Meet Minerva, there's actually more screen cells out there, and I think I have some of them. There are some screen cells out there, animation cells, of scenes that were not included, towards the end when she met her best friend's cousin. There were some moments, when she meets him, that were cut out of the original. And I looked at these and I'm thinking, man, why didn't they add them in there? Now, if I can include them here in this video, in this audio video, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But it's like I looked at this and I'm like, man, that would have been nice to see, because you got like one moment where the heartbeat gag is happening and it's literally engulfing her entire body and stuff, and it's like you look at that and you're thinking, why couldn't they have added that in? That would have made it even better, with her reaction and stuff. But unfortunately they didn't. But when I look at these two cartoons, though, outside of the other appearances she made before and after, I mean, she even appeared in Wacko's Wish, and she even appeared in the Star Wars parody they did. when I look at these two cartoons, to me, that's just a novelty as to, why they became so popular. And it's not just because of the way, her character is designed and everything, but it's also the fact that she kind of gets her comeuppance. And the way she gets her comeuppance is basically similar in gag to the males. We see that. We saw it at the end of Meet Minerva, when she ends up doing pretty much all the same kind of gag that Newt did every time he would bump into her. She ended up doing that. But then again, she would also do other gags that he didn't do. Like, for example, after she does some of the gags he did when meeting her or encountering her, what does she do to add to it? Oh, I don't know. How about she literally melts in her best friend's cousin's arms? She literally melts in his hands, and she does a melting and the melting she does, basically, I should say, is she ends up splitting in half. Like, one half goes this way and the other half goes that way, and they all meet up basically into one puddle, that she, remains as for about a few seconds, and then she pops up and reforms herself as an obnoxious, boat horn, and then she basically kind of goes back to normal, but then she has all these multiple heads of her popping out, looking, across every part of, her best friend's cousin's body and all that. So, so to me, when she gets her comeuppance, sometimes she does it, just a bit more. It's like the animators and the writers decided, we're going to have Minerva take it a step further, with her interpretation of the gags, and they do it. They absolutely do it. I mean, you go to Moon over Minerva, and we saw how she reacts to the werewolf version of, Wilford. We've seen that. I mean, we saw how Wilford acts towards her when he sees her and everything, but then she completely just goes off the chain when she sees him. I mean, her eyes literally pop out of her head, and, her body's like in a standstill, like frozen, because her eyes, left her, to go check out the Wilford werewolf and all that. And then of course you get the melting scene, the lustful melt scene, if you will. And just like I mentioned with Newt, she takes it a step further. Now, Newt didn't do a melting or anything like that. That was something that Minerva, the animators, the writers, added to her gag, to her gag when she saw, Trudy's cousin, her best friend's cousin, if you will. And, with Moon over Minerva, I should say, what they did is they basically made it to where she would do similar gags, at times, but, she would also do her own thing, like we saw, like I said, with Meet Minerva. So, for example, when she sees Wilford's werewolf form for, like, the second time, and she says, Yahoo, my man, what does she do? She stands up straight and literally melts. Now, when Wilford melted and everything, after, Minerva was leading him on at the beginning of the short, what happens? Does he completely melt and just, be a puddle and that's it? No. He does melt. He is a puddle, but the thing is, he talks. He still talks and everything, and he's like, I can't feel my legs. That's it. That's what he says. He's able to talk. But when Minerva does her interpretation of the gag, when she starts getting her comeuppance and everything, what happens? She ends up melting completely into a puddle to the point that, as I've mentioned on several occasions, Wilford literally, in his werewolf form, has to pick her up, he has to pick her up like a wet towel and, wring her out, just to reform her, if you will. He has to wring her out like a red towel, and, just to reform her. Because as I've mentioned before in the past, I think that if Wilford wanted to, he could have walked off to the city, gotten something to eat at a nice diner, and then gone and seen a maybe 2-hour, 3-hour movie in a theater, if you will, and then basically come back, and guess what? Minerva would still be there on the ground, completely melted. That's basically, how further she took, the creators, the writers had her take the gag, to the point that in this case, unlike Wilford, when he did it, in his nerd form, here, she would end up doing it to a point that you could walk away from her, come back like 4 or 5 hours later, she'd still be there completely melted, and you'd have to basically do exactly what he did. And then, of course, you have other gags like, the heart gag where her heart's pumping out and it's pumping her head full of air and making it into a balloon and stuff like that. You get a sense basically that when her character was created, it was created with the intent that every time she does a wild take in a gag, she does it tenfold. She takes it to another level. And you could see that. You could absolutely see that. And I'm glad they did that. And I'm glad they did that. And to me, that's what made Minerva Mink a very memorable character. And this is why I believe when you look back at the soft continuation, soft reboot of Animaniacs on Hulu, this is why people are upset that she was not brought back. She was not brought back due to the fact that, basically, hold on for a second. Like I was saying, now you can see why people were upset why she was not brought back, because basically they wanted to see this again. They wanted to see this character, go out there and be who she is and, invoke the gags that she's known to, take part in, and if not do it even more so than she did before. I mean, I even mentioned that if they wanted to, they could have had to go and have a sort of her own, done her wild take gags, including the melting, and heck, I even said, you could have her melt and have her literally seep into the ground, as part of the reaction, and then all of a sudden you see like this flower pop up with her face on it, or you see this rose pop up out of the ground where she's melted and seeped into. It opens up, and out she slides down on a petal, if you will. To me, I think that would have been great to see. But unfortunately, it's because of how she was displayed, or in how she. Sorry about that, but like I said, kind of recapping, so I didn't try to figure out where I was before I got before the phone rang there. But like I said, this is why fans want to see her fans wanted to see her, I should say, in the rebooted Animaniacs, or self-fully retconned, Animaniacs cartoon on Hulu, because of the fact that, to me, as I've mentioned, previously before the phone rang and I had to pause the audio here, the recording. Basically, she could have done a wild take like she had done previously, and I have a cough drop in my mouth, I do apologize. But anyway, like I said, she could have done a wild take like she had done previously in the original cartoons, and done it to the point like she could have melted, seeped into the ground, and then you would see like a flower rise up with her face on it, or you see like a rose, raise up and open up, and she comes sliding out. I mean, you could have done something like that and everything, and fans would have loved it. Fans would have loved seeing that from her, because, that is who Minerva is to them. I mean, this is why fans are always so glad that the Animaniacs comics by DC, primarily featured her a lot, because of the fact that, the comics were a little bit more freelance. They didn't have to worry about, any. They didn't have to worry about any, restrictions or anything like that. They could be as, they could be as crazy and as wild as they want to be, with limitations, of course, with limitations. But to me, again, it's, basically it's, how she was written, it's how her character was presented, that made fans love her. Because she always would get her comeuppance. She would always get a comeuppance, and she would take it to the upteenth level compared to her male counterparts. Again, you go to Meet Minerva. You see all the wild takes and gags that Newt does around her, and then when she does her variation of some of his wild takes, when she meets her best friend's cousin, she also adds to that. Because, again, in Meet Minerva, Newt didn't melt. In at the end of it, she does, and she melts literally, in the arms of her best friend's cousin's arms, or hands, if you will. Literally melts through his hands, but melts, by splitting herself in half and coming together, on the ground as a puddle, and then reforming it as a boat horn and stuff. And he never did all that. She did. And then when you look at Moon over Minerva, the only thing she did that was similar to Wilford is the melting gag and all that. And what happens here? What happens here and everything? When she does the gag, unlike Wilford, because when he does it, he's still able to talk. When she does it, he in his werewolf, alter ego has to pick her up like a wet, towel or rag and wring her out just to, reform her. And then she takes it to another level by having her do the heartbeat gag, and it pumps her head up so much it becomes a balloon and starts floating off. I mean, when you look at that, you realize, or you start to realize why fans love her so much. They love her because of the fact that she takes, the wild takes, the Tex Avery wild takes and gags, if you will, to the upteenth level. She does the similar gags that her male counterparts do, but she also adds on to it. She adds on to it and takes it to another level. Like I said, the melting thing in Moon over Minerva, Wilford talks when he, after he does it, when she does it, he has to wring her out like a wet towel. Or she adds to it. Like she did some of the gags, identical gags that Newt did, when he first sees her. And what does she do? She does them, but then she adds to it. And to me, that's why fans love this character, because of the fact of, she's written in a way to where she'll do the gag, but she'll also, add her own spice to it. She'll add her own spice to it. And to me, that's why fans wanted to see her back in the soft continuation of the Hulu version of Animaniacs. That's why fans wanted to see her back. And hey, maybe down the line they might see her back. We don't know. Time will tell. But let me know what your thoughts are. Do you agree with a lot of what I said about Minerva? How do you feel about her as a character? And do you think she does take, the wild takes, the gags, that some of the male counterparts that she would encounter do, but also take it to the upteenth level by adding her own style to it, like the melting and all that? Let me know. And until next time, I'll talk to y'all later.